All right. Hey, folks. Katie Rosema here, one of your AFA emerging leaders for 2021-2022. We are thrilled to be joined today by Colonel Retired Julie Eslinger Jensen. She is a phenomenal nurse, so you know she's good people. She's got a great story of the ways she served, how things have changed during her time of service, and we're really looking forward to hearing from her. So without further ado, Julie, thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad to have you share your story with us today.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's an honor to have anybody want to hear about these events years ago.
Well, you know, you sort of hit on something, and let's start with that. You had a lengthy career, a storied career, started as a nurse, and you said when you first started you were only going to be in for 2 years, and you stayed with the military for about, what, 30 years or so? So what happened that 2 years turned into 30 years?
It was always something interesting and exciting and a new experience. It's like, I have to do this, I don't want to miss it. And when I started, I said, you know, I thought I'd give the commander, the base commander who was interviewing me, I thought I'd give him an out in case he thought she's going to stay too long. So I said, you never have to worry about me. I'll only be here for 2 years and then I'm out of here. And he said, well, that isn't exactly what I wanted to hear. We're investing a lot of money in you, and we'd like you to think about that. And so I just liked everything that I was doing. I liked the challenges and the new experiences, and I mean, experiences I would never have had any other way.
Yeah, I can imagine. So when you started serving with the Air National Guard, that was, 25 years from Vietnam to the Cold War was when you were serving with the Air National Guard. What changes did you see during those 25 years in your service with ANG?
Changes I saw is, what was interesting is when I started and the Vietnam War was beginning to heat up, we had to go to flight school. That was part of the nurse requirement. 5 weeks and 5 days or whatever it was. What was interesting about that as we look back is the instructors that were teaching us had just come back as flight nurses that flew out of Vietnam and brought the injured back. So that was as much experience as they had, and they were passing on the information to us who would be doing it next. So we didn't have instructors with years and years of experience. It was like hot off the press for them, and then we graduated from that, and opportunities became available. And with this, I can now say what the difference is with the Guard and the Reserve. In the Air Guard, we had individual opportunities to do active duty, and with Vietnam and the things that were happening, we had some assignments from the Air Force, but then there were some that were not, and they were out there wanting people to help, but they didn't ask for it. So I volunteered to help whenever they needed somebody. And that's the difference with the Guard and the Reserve. I could go as an individual. I didn't have to go with the whole unit. If I would have been in the Reserve and they had not requested the Reserve, I would not have been able to do it. So it's more of an individual. Now, that was back then in 1968 and 69. I don't know if it's still that way now. I'm just not that close to it anymore with how it's different. Mm-hmm. As relates to the rank, I'm kind of jumping ahead as long as I'm talking about the difference. As far as relates to the rank, in the Air Guard, rank, if it is there, is usually a state decision as to who gets it. And it's kind of been known that the pilots get the rank. And so I knew that I would not get the additional promotion. I had worked with all of the Air Force and Air Force Reserve nurses and doctors through the many years that I was in, so they knew who I was. And then when I asked for a transfer to the Air Force Reserve, I was accepted because, like I said, they kind of knew who I was. And through the Air Force Reserve, I was able to get promoted because their promotions are handled differently from the Air Guard.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. And so when you first started, like you said, the Vietnam War was very heavy, right? And you were getting tactical training and going to flight school. And how did that differ when you were serving during the Cold War? You're not jumping out of planes, right? We're fighting a different kind of fight. And as a nurse, how did your role change from Vietnam to the Cold War?
It probably didn't change that much, because when we're training to care for people in an airplane, it's kind of universal. Nothing much is different. What was different from Vietnam and during that period to actually Desert Storm is during Vietnam there was so much hostility because America thought they were going to win. We had 3 presidents, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and I think finally Reagan, when it all ended. And so the Americans were expecting us to win that war, and we didn't. And the news media every night was very, very negative with all the injuries, all the people that we were losing. It was a negative media for the American people. So there was hostility to all of the military people. When I went on active duty, I had to go in civilian clothes and then independently fly to Travis. At Travis, take a bus out to San Francisco. And then from San Francisco, take a bus out to Travis Air Force Base, go into the ladies' room, change into my military uniform, and then ask to be put on the additional crew member status to get transportation to Vietnam via Hawaii and Clark and everything else. What's different now is they are sent, I think the medical people now are sent commercial air wherever they have to go. They don't have to struggle and find their own way to get there and hope that the air crew will accept them on the airplane. And sometimes we weren't accepted because they probably had cargo that was dangerous, and so they couldn't accept us. So we might be sitting, waiting for another airplane to come through. Now, there was enough traffic at that time, so it shouldn't take that long. But it wasn't easy.
Right.
But,
right.
You just kind of enjoy the challenge, I guess. When you're young, you just do it.
It sounds like a theme, right? You're always up for sort of the next thing. You're always looking for the next thing.
Got to be ready for it.
Yeah.
It was good.
So, yeah, that's awesome. So tell me, back during your service when you first started, and you talked about hopping on planes, changing in the ladies' room. Talk to me about what was it like to serve as a woman in Vietnam, and maybe how did that change throughout your career, or did it?
I don't know that it did. In fact, some of us nurses and officers that are retired often talk about all the sexual harassment accusations, and we never felt that we were sexually harassed. I don't know if that's because we were officers and nurses, if we instilled a certain fear in people who they didn't approach us, but none of us felt the same sexual harassment. But what's interesting about that is one of the more recent people said, "You were probably harassed and didn't know it." And he said, "Did anybody ever tell you look good in something?" Well, I don't remember if they did or not, but he's saying right now that's considered sexual harassment. And so we probably didn't have the high standards and weren't aware, but sexual harassment for us was probably being touched or having something said to us, which just never happened.
Yeah, that's good.
And the thing that changed for everyone is because the whole nation was so hostile to the Vietnam veterans and to the Vietnam military that it turned completely around with Desert Storm. And that's good because now the military doesn't have to hide. They can wear their uniforms wherever, and they're honored. They're thanked. And how it should be, I guess, but that's not how it was then. And you never know how cultures through time change.
Right. It's true. Yeah. Even I know my parents lived through Vietnam, and they were not in the military, but they would say the same things you were, that there was not the support that we see for our military members that we do now. So it's good that we've gone in the right direction there.
Yes, it is. And I think we'll stay in that direction.
Let's hope.
For now, anyway.
Let's hope. Right? Yeah. What made you want to be a nurse, and what made you want to be a nurse with the military?
I wanted to be a nurse from a very early age because I thought I have to know enough to be able to take care of my family. And the only way I can know that is by becoming a nurse and helping care for people, and I liked every bit of it. What interested me in the military is, to be honest with you, it was a Navy uniform. And then when I checked into the Navy and realized that I could only be stateside, maybe not in a ship and in a hospital, I decided, well, that isn't for me. And then I knew it wasn't the Army. So then I was dating a pilot out in Montana, and he told me about flight nursing. And then I thought, that's just my cup of tea. So I came back to Minnesota to be closer to family and join the Air Guard.
Oh, that's awesome. So you started talking a little bit about some of the differences between the Guard and the Reserves. There's a lot of folks here, right? You're talking to Air Force and Space Force Association members and maybe folks who aren't super familiar with some of that. A lot probably are. But what are some other differences other than the promoting of what the Guard and the Reserves are, how they work? What's some information about that?
My experience has been very, very similar as far as our work life, because here in Minnesota, the 934th has an area vac group, and we became friends. And I think some of it is political, because as we became friends, we started doing exercises together, and I got informed from my command that that's not something we should be doing. But we did it anyway because we had no reason not to do it with them. So our missions are very, very similar. Where we noticed the differences when we wanted to do active duty or wanted to do something, we had more individual responsibility. And I'd say throughout my career in the Air National Guard, and maybe because everything was new. See, the Air National Guard just started getting nurses back in 1965. When the Air Force said to them, our flight nurses can't support Vietnam and can't support what we have to. Will you consider having an air evac unit? And so we started like at a very beginning, and we just kind of did what we had to. We had to write some of our own curriculum because the Air Force wasn't ready for it. There was a certain jealousy or envy or non-acceptance from the Air Force nurses because they wanted to be the cream of the crop, and now they have to deal with Reserve and Guard nurses who aren't full-time. And I know if I had been active duty Air Force, I would have never survived because I kind of have to do things my way sometimes. And I was able to do that and grow our unit through the Air Guard. That because we were out here by ourselves and we did what we thought we had to do, and our unit was proud of it.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that some folks were full-time, some were not. Were you a full-time reservist, or did you have a civilian job as well?
I had a civilian job, and I got a lot of support from my civilian job for when I had to be away with the military. And being on a flying status is more requiring either Guard or Reserve, because you have to put in a certain amount of flying hours, a certain amount of training hours, you have to be checked out. So we had weekly flying that we had to do for at least 2.5 hours in the air and be here an hour ahead of time, and then the debriefing afterwards. So it was pretty much one evening a week was spent being with the Guard flying and getting trained and training other people.
Wow, that's great. I think a lot of folks would be jealous of that. What's that?
I said it was demanding, but when you like what you're doing, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, that's surely true. Do you have a story that sticks out or an experience that sticks out? I'm sure you've got several, right? But one or two you'd care to share with us over your lengthy career?
I do have several, but the one that I think about most often, especially even now with things happening in the Ukraine, and it's so sad. But when we flew the injured back, it was, it took them out of Vietnam. They RON'd at and probably longer at Tachikawa in Japan, and then from there we loaded them the next day or two and brought them back to stateside medical facilities by going through Alaska. And what's interesting, when the Wheels Up in Japan, there was an applause and a yay. And Wheels Down at Andrews or on the East Coast, there was silence. And the silence was because their families had abandoned them. Their families did not know they were coming back. So many of them that were offloaded onto the buses, when I said, you're going to be there, you're going to see your family, no, our family has abandoned us. And that was sad for them to not be happy to come home because of their families and friends. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to the air crew then, I said, someday this is going to come to haunt us, because people are abandoning these injured people. And they were, at that time, they were almost more injured than they are now, because we had different weapons. And we gave care right there, but it's different than even Desert Storm, which is good. Desert Storm, I think it wasn't as bad as it was in Vietnam. So that sticks out in my mind many days of their feelings when they came home.
Oh, I'm sure that sticks with you. Well, I'm sure you were a caring face, so thank you for being that for those folks who are traveling. So, if you could give yourself some younger advice, right? You told me how you wanted to become a nurse, and that it was this gentleman who you were seeing who kind of told you about the flight nurse road. But if you could give yourself or young women now, or even young men who are just getting started on their career, some advice to get them going in the right direction, what sort of advice would you, A, give yourself back several years ago when you first started, and what would you give folks now in terms of advice?
I would probably, I didn't say it to myself then because I didn't think about it until now, but I would say, do what your passion is. Because when you do what your passion is, you don't know that you're even doing it. You're just doing your passion. And when you're curious and adventurous, go for it. Don't let anybody stop you. Have courage, and if you doubt and have fears, do it anyway. There's nothing you can lose. Maybe there is, but I didn't. Or I made it work or whatever. I don't know what I would say. Just go for your passion.
Yeah. That's great advice. And I think a lot of us need to hear that more, right? There's so many other things that we focus on, that passion should be one of the top things that we really pay attention to. So, reading your bio, there's so many great accomplishments here. Speaking of following your passion and being sort of rewarded and succeeding in it, you've won several awards. You've got several achievements to list. Are there any achievements or things that you've done that you're really, really proud of that you can share with us?
Yes, and it'll probably surprise you, and it'll probably surprise Roman. But when I retired from the Air Force, the World War II women wanted me to join them. And initially I thought, they're all old. I don't know if I want to join them. Well, then I met them, and I started hearing their stories, how they were never recognized, how when they left the military, they were told to leave their uniforms, put on their civilian clothes, and find a bus and go home. And they had never been honored or recognized. Some of them had families who never wanted them to join the military, so they weren't proud of them coming back. And so I kept saying to my husband, I just don't understand why nobody has ever recognized these women. I think it's just awful. And he said, well, what's wrong? Why don't you do it? And it's through the Air Force Association that supported me in honoring these women. And we had an unbelievable event at the Officers Club. When it started, I thought we might have 13 women. Well, as the word got out, women that had lived in Minnesota were now living in Kansas came for this event. And instead of 13, we had almost 200 women that came, and it was all
Wow.
because of support from the Air Force Association. Yeah.
Oh,
And I
that's
had
fantastic.
I had so many volunteers helping, people that had been in the military, people that had heard about me, knew I was doing it. They came out and helped park cars, and they ushered them here, and it was just a wonderful event.
Oh,
And now,
that's
unfortunately, most of them are not living anymore. I think we have one of them that's still living.
great. Wow.
See what age does to you?
Well, there's no stopping it, or so I'm told. We just keep going.
There's what?
There's no stopping it. We keep getting older.
Unfortunately,
I haven't found a way to get younger.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic. So I love it, and I love that that's your connection with the Air and Space Forces, Air Forces Association. Now it's Air and Space Forces. What other things should AFA should we be doing to support folks? I mean, this is a prime example with honoring these women who served so bravely. What can AFA, folks like myself, folks like Roman, folks like you, how can we continue to educate, advocate, and support our military members?
That is a real challenge because, see, I'm of the age where when I grew up, both my parents and in school, we were kind of told that whatever profession you decide to do, there's always a support group with that, always an association. So I just knew that I would always be associated with a professional organization of what my passion is, what I am. So the Air Force Association, it was just a natural. And I've been in the Air Force Association even while I was still in the Guard. The challenge is how to get the younger generation that has so many distractions in their life that we probably never had. How to get them interested. Is it through technology? I don't know. I wish I had the answer, because my disappointment is right here in Minnesota, we have a lot of young people in the Air Guard, and they don't have that same passion. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough.
I don't know what challenges. We probably have to get together with them and say, what can we do to help you?
Yeah.
To help you want something other than what you're doing now, or I don't know. If I had the answer, I'd snap my fingers and have it happen.
Yeah, right? Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, too. There's so many distractions now. We are a very, very busy people. We almost take pride in being extended, right? Oh, I got this and that and whatever to do, and to sit down and actually kind of take a breath and really focus on what's important is a tough thing nowadays, I think. We're pulled in a lot of different directions.
But what's interesting is we have so many conveniences to help us be more efficient and supposedly have more time. But I think we get buried in them. In other words, you text and get an answer, and then can you put the phone away, or do you keep on?
Right.
There probably isn't any understandable discipline for allowing more time, because there should be more time now, because the conveniences that we have.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. And I think you hit and made another good point is we have to, as an association, reach out to young people, right? And we have to meet them where they're at, whether it's on social media or whether it's going to where they are. We have a lot of Arnold Air Society Silver Wings folks out here in Colorado, phenomenal, just gifted young people beyond my comprehension, right? Is what are we doing to go to them and to give them the case for why AFA should be a part of their life. So that's good, and that's a good reminder that we need to be doing that.
How do we do it? I mean, the same thing is true here in St. Paul with St. Thomas University and the University of St. Thomas. But I mean, it's like they're there to do while they're there for the 4 years, and then their history. And they have to have a built-in feeling that this is part of their life now. Just a small part of their life that they have to be involved. I don't know what the answer is. But
yeah. Well, we'll keep trying, right?
Well, we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting a little bit, what's something that you're very grateful for throughout your career? Something that you maybe got through the military that you wouldn't have gotten elsewhere, or something that it gave you access to? You mentioned a lot of different experiences, right? There's something that sticks out that you're grateful for?
I am grateful for the wonderful people that became medical technicians and nurses in my unit, because without them, we would not have excelled in the many areas that the unit did. And they were always willing. It's like we have a volunteer force that is dedicated, and maybe they have the passion because everything worked well. And our unit had never received any awards. And when I saw how hard they were working and how well we were doing, I decided that we're going to apply for this award. And not only did we get one award, but we got 2 awards, which the unit had never gotten before. And probably one of the most surprising, grateful things was when I was with the reserve. I was an IMA at Scott Air Force Base, and we had a commander's meeting, and Colonel Carlton was the doctor who was commander of MAC at the time, and had just come back from Desert Storm. And he said, there's only one unit I will ever go to war with again, and that's this Minnesota outfit, the one on 9th. Yeah. He said there isn't anything they're willing to do and want to do and step to it and help. And actually, I got a tear in my eye because he didn't know who I was and I didn't know who he was. Wow. So after the meeting, I went up to him and I said, Colonel Carl, that was the unit that I used to command, and he said, they're outstanding. I won't go with anybody but they. So that was very satisfying.
Oh, heck yeah.
I didn't do a lot of it. I wasn't there with him. I didn't do any of it, but it's the people that were in my unit that I worked with. And it's a good feeling to know that they're doing so well.
That's awesome. Well, I would say you probably did have something to do with it, because a good leader, and a bad leader, unfortunately, but a good leader leaves their traits long after they're gone. So I would say you should take a little bit of credit for that. I'm going to give it to you, whether you take it or not.
Okay, thank you.
So one other question here that I didn't send you before, but it's a softball. What are you doing these days? What keeps you busy? What are you passionate about these days, and what are you doing with your time?
I'm on the board for the Minnesota Air Guard Museum because I was with them for so long, even though I retired from the reserve, which is just around the corner. Mm-hmm. I'm on the board here, and right now we're working at preserving what we have, but mostly the museum is located on base, and the base is now saying we need this space. You're going to have to find other space. So I'm on the subcommittee for finding a new location for the Air Guard Museum. And it doesn't sound like much, but the political ramifications of everything that you do is just there all of the time. Mm-hmm. And I suppose because I'm one of the older people on the committee, I kind of know how some things work, and so it helps them see what we might do and not do and whatever else. So, but that keeps me busy.
Oh, I bet. So we're saying if we've got anybody watching this who's in Minnesota, they should come check out the museum and maybe help figure out where it should be located.
Absolutely.
Awesome. There's so many, and I can't help myself, right? This is where I get excited. There are so many phenomenal smaller museums around the country. Right here in Pueblo, down just 40 minutes, we've got the Weiss Broad Museum, and our AFA chapter has meetings down there sometimes. I mean, you walk in and you think, we're in Pueblo, Colorado. There are planes here that I've never seen at the, Smithsonian museums. There are passionate docents who were at Hiroshima who, could tell you what it was like to actually be there. I really would encourage folks, and certainly, when I'm in Minnesota, I'm going to come looking for you. I'm going to have Roman help me, and we'll come say hi. But
I hope you will.
Yeah, because I'm a Michigan girl, so we're close.
Oh, okay. Well, you know about the Midwest. Upper Midwest for you, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Awesome. That's great. Well, hey, Julie, I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Do you have any parting words you want to share with us, or shall we call it a day?
I do. I want to say thank you to you, to Roman, to Terry Morris, who helped me get set up. And then mostly, if anybody is interested in understanding what aeromedical evacuation is all about, this book that I'm showing you is the only one that is a history of aeromedical evacuation. Now, it relates only to the 109th, but it brings in everybody else that we worked with, everybody else that we flew with, all of our experiences. And
Awesome.
when the guys wrote this book, they were asking for monies. And in order for the History Museum of Minnesota to give them money, they wanted to know how many other books like that are out there. And because there are no other books like it out there, they were able to get the funding source to write the book. So,
that's awesome.
Good book.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing that. And you know what? I'm gonna snag the information from you. I'll get either you or Roman to email that to me, and we'll put it in the video information so folks can check it out when they see the video. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You have a good day.
Yes, I will.
Good visiting with you. We can do this again sometime just to stay in touch.
Absolutely. I would love that. That would be great. And I would love to meet you in person someday too. That would be fantastic.
You will.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll say bye to Roman too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye, Roman.